Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the entire world's stack of daily global news, all the research, all the analysis, and we filter out the noise.
Right, and synthesize it down into the absolute core of what you need to know.
Our goal is pretty simple. Make you the most informed person in any conversation. We want to give you speed, but without, sacrificing real depth.
And if we had to give this deep dive a title, I think it would be The Fragile Future.
Ooh, I like that. Why?
Because this week, when you look at all the sources, there's just an astonishing number of connections where cutting-edge technology really slams, into these very basic analog vulnerabilities.
Okay, give me an example.
We're tracking everything from missile shrapnel that's literally aimed at satellites to autonomous vehicles being completely paralyzed by a simple power outage.
Oh.
And at the same time, the price of safety, gold is just soaring to record highs as all this global anxiety mounts.
Okay, let's unpack this enormous stack.
Yeah.
Our deep dive mission today is to connect all of these seemingly disparate events.
Yeah.
We're going to start with a massive scientific breakthrough that literally redefines how the brain's chemistry works in Parkinson's disease. Then we'll jump over to the very turbulent mobility sector.
And analyze how these infrastructure failures expose the Achilles heel of systems like Waymo.
From there, we'll transition into the intense geopolitics of potential peace talks for the conflict in Ukraine. We have to examine the really challenging compromises being discussed there.
And finally, we have to understand the economic fallout. The consequences of all this global uncertainty will track that flight of institutional capital straight into precious metals.
So it's a journey from the molecular level all the way to the cosmic scale.
And we promise you are going to learn something fascinating at every single step.
That sounds like a journey we definitely need a map for. So let's start at the frontier. Let's hit the cosmos and the lab first.
Good place to start.
Because we have a genuinely groundbreaking finding, something that should cause immediate, tomorrow, change in neurological research.
It's a big one.
We're talking about a complete paradigm shift in how we understand Parkinson's disease, and specifically, the role of dopamine.
And this is a finding that fundamentally challenges, decades of accepted science. And for you, the learner, this is really crucial context.
So what was the old idea?
The traditional belief, the one in all the textbooks, held that dopamine acted as the brain's gas pedal for movement.
The accelerator, the thing that makes you go.
Exactly. If you wanted to start moving or move faster or generate more force, the thinking was that the dopamine system directly controlled that action. It was the source of the acceleration.
But this new research suggests that analogy is just entirely wrong.
Completely wrong. Dopamine isn't the accelerator, it's the lubricant.
The lubricant. Okay, break that down for me.
So it doesn't initiate or directly control the speed or the strength of the movement itself. Instead, it operates entirely in the background. It's preparing and enabling the pathways so that when the main motor commands are sent from the brain,
the movement can happen smoothly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Without the tremors and the rigidity that are so characteristic of Parkinson's.
Yeah.
Think of it like making sure the gears are properly oiled so the engine can actually turn.
Rather than being the fuel itself.
That's the perfect analogy.
So why does that distinction matter so much? Because current treatments, the main one being LDOPA, they're essentially just flooding the entire system with dopamine. Right?
They are.
It's like hitting that gas pedal with a sledgehammer, so to speak.
With a sledgehammer, precisely. And the clinical evidence for this new model is really compelling. The experimental detail shows that when scientists altered dopamine levels during an existing movement,
While the person was already in motion.
right, it made very little difference to the physical output. But, and this is the key, the moment they restored normal dopamine levels after that alteration, the test subjects experienced these notable, measurable improvements in their function and coordination.
So that confirmed it. The benefit isn't from controlling the movement, but from preparing the system beforehand.
You got it. It's all about that systemic preparation.
Okay, here's where we get into the so what. If we accept this new lubricant metaphor, what on earth happens to treatment?
It has to change.
Because that flood the system approach often leads to some really severe adverse side effects.
Oh, absolutely. Things like dyskinesia, those uncontrolled, jerky movements, which can be incredibly debilitating for patients.
Just as bad as the original symptoms sometimes.
Sometimes worse. And this paradigm shift, It directs research away from just trying to boost overall dopamine levels and points it toward incredibly targeted treatments.
Focused on specific receptors.
Exactly. The research specifically highlights the significance of the D1 receptor.
The D1 receptor.
Yes, by focusing on that D1 receptor, scientists are now isolating the specific pathway that's responsible for that lubricant effect, the movement stabilization.
So you could manage the movement without triggering all the widespread motor fluctuations and, the other debilitating side effects that come from these high-dose, non-specific treatments.
That is the hope. It is truly the hope of precision medicine in neurology.
And it also opens up entirely new avenues for addressing the non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's, doesn't it?
It does, things people often overlook.
Like depression, anxiety, sleep issues, cognitive problems. Symptoms that get pushed aside when the focus is just on stopping the tremors.
Precisely. If dopamine is more of a systemic preparation and support function, then its role in mood, sleep, and executive function suddenly becomes a lot clearer. It's more tractable for research.
It shifts the entire field's gaze toward better holistic disease management, not just movement management.
A fundamental revision like this, it causes shockwaves. It forces immediate redirection of studies, of funding, across research labs all over the world.
We've seen human innovation pushing the boundaries of biology.
Yeah.
But it's also making us realize how much we still don't know.
Not even close.
Especially about the systems right beneath our feet. Systems critical to the stability of our planet. Let's shift from the molecular level, from the brain down to the deep sea.
From the brain to the ocean floor. It's a good transition because science is also making huge fundamental discoveries down there.
What have we found?
Scientists recently identified 20 new species.
20.
20. Species previously unknown to science, found in the largely unexplored depths of the Pacific Ocean. This specific discovery happened in deep-sea habitats that we're only now really getting consistent access to.
20 new species. That highlights the staggering undiscovered richness of our deep-sea marine biodiversity.
It really does.
It often feels like we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about our own ocean floor.
You're not far off, and this isn't just a fun fact for a biology textbook. This discovery emphasizes the urgent need for more exploration and, critically, for conservation.
Why conservation specifically?
Because these largely unexplored habitats, they're often under crushing pressure in total darkness. They offer these extraordinary insights into biological adaptations. For conservationists, this data is absolutely crucial.
So they can get ahead of things.
Exactly. They're trying to preemptively establish protected zones before deep-sea mining or trawling activities potentially destroy these undiscovered ecosystems forever.
That's a powerful point. It's a real race between discovery and destruction.
It is.
Okay, let's move from the ocean floor to the deep cosmos and the increasingly precarious nature of our orbital environment. First, some stunning visuals from NASA.
That's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
Right. And they're using the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST.
And they've released this just astonishing image of two interacting dwarf galaxies, NGC 4490 and NGC 4485.
Where are they?
They're located in the constellation Canes Venatici, which is roughly 24 million light years away from us here on Earth.
24 million light years. That's quite a commute. But why the focus on dwarf galaxies? They sound, a bit minor.
They are anything but minor in the grand scheme of cosmic history. Dwarf galaxies are absolutely crucial for understanding how galaxies form and grow.
Because they're like a window into the past.
Exactly. They are thought to reflect conditions in the early universe. Here's the technical reason. They contain abundant gas, which is the raw material for star formation. But they have limited existing stars, and crucially, they have a lower abundance of heavier elements, what astronomers just call metals.
So they're cosmologically primitive then?
That's the perfect term. They are small, low metallicity systems. So by observing them as they interact and merge, astronomers are essentially looking back in time.
Piecing together how the cosmic scaffolding of the universe was initially built billions of years ago.
Yes. It helps us answer that foundational question. How did our own galaxy, the Milky Way, get so massive?
And while we're gazing 24 million light years away, we're also tracking some visitors much closer to home. Specifically, an interstellar comet.
Yes, 3I Italy.
An interstellar visitor.
That's right. This comet actually originated outside our solar system, which makes it an incredibly valuable object for study.
So it's the latest.
Following its closest approach to Earth, what we call its perihelion new X-ray images were captured. And the data they collected is so detailed and so unexpected that it's actually prompting updates to the Loeb classification scale.
Which is what exactly?
It's the system astronomers use to categorize and understand these interstellar visitors as they travel through our solar system and beyond.
So every time we get new data on one of these objects from the outside, it forces us to rethink our local models.
It really does. It's a constant learning process.
Speaking of things moving fast in space, let's turn to the escalating controversies surrounding SpaceX.
Yeah, this is a big one.
A Wall Street Journal report recently dropped, and it alleges that a Starship test flight explosion posed significant immediate risks to commercial aircraft.
This is a really serious issue. It brings the safety protocols of commercial space operations into sharp question. The report, and it cites documents from the FAA.
The Federal Aviation Administration.
Right. It detailed how the incident where the rocket broke up mid-flight over Texas created this massive, unexpected hazard zone.
Just how big a hazard are we talking about?
Debris rained down over an extensive area for a staggering 50 minutes.
50 minutes. And this wasn't just a theoretical risk. It required immediate, almost frantic intervention from air traffic controllers.
Absolutely practical risk. The FAA records show that controllers had to intervene directly to protect passenger flights. They warned and immediately redirected a JetBlue flight that was on its way to Puerto Rico just to avoid that debris zone.
Wow.
And on top of that, they had to step in during a close call between two other aircraft that were navigating the area to prevent a collision.
So the potential for a catastrophic incident was clearly there until air traffic control cleared the zone.
It was very present, yes.
So we're talking about real debris, real passenger aircraft with hundreds of people, and real last-minute diversions. How did SpaceX respond to this very detailed reporting?
Well, SpaceX criticized the Wall Street Journal's reporting. They called it misleading and hyperbolic.
In their defense?
They insisted that public safety is, and I'm quoting here, paramount. They argued that designated response areas were established with the U.S. Space Force and the FAA, and that even with the breakup, their protocols effectively mitigated the risk. Well, the sheer volume, the velocity, and the duration of that debris cloud, it certainly raises questions. Are the buffer zones and risk assessments that we need for these unprecedented, super heavy lift launches actually sufficient?
Right. The conversation now shifts from can they launch to can they launch safely in busy airspace?
That's exactly it.
And that highlights the regulatory and safety headaches that come with blending commercial spaceflight into everyday air traffic.
No.
But the risk of orbital congestion isn't just accidental.
No, it's not.
We are also seeing escalating geopolitical intent aimed at turning space into a war zone. We have news on Russian anti-satellite weapon development.
And this is perhaps the darkest strategic implication in the space domain this week. Western intelligence agencies are reporting serious suspicions that Russia is actively developing a very dangerous zone effect anti-satellite weapon.
A zone effect weapon. What makes it that, as opposed to just targeting a single satellite?
So the technology is reportedly designed to incapacitate crucial low Earth orbit satellites. And the primary obvious target would be Elon Musk's Starlink constellation.
And the mechanism?
The mechanism described is designed for maximum sustained damage over a wide area. It involves deploying swarms of high-density pellets, so essentially large amounts of shrapnel, into Starlink's operating orbits.
So the goal isn't necessarily a surgical strike on one satellite?
Not at all. It is to flood that specific orbital altitude, creating a massive, dense debris field that would essentially blind, degrade, or even destroy multiple satellites at once.
Rendering an entire orbital zone temporarily unusable.
Or permanently. It's incredibly dangerous.
And this sounds like a strategic game changer because Starlink has been absolutely vital to Ukraine's defense and communications since the start of the conflict.
Precisely. The strategic context here is crystal clear. Russia is aiming to undermine the Western space advantages that have proven so instrumental in supporting Ukraine's command and control.
So by potentially neutralizing Starlink, they could effectively cut off vital communication and intelligence lines.
It raises the stakes for the militarization of space significantly. This technology moves beyond taking out a single high-value target and threatens the operational environment for everyone in low Earth orbit.
This moves us seamlessly into Section 3, Technology Under Pressure.
Okay.
We're talking mobility, markets, and AI ethics. And the high-growth, high-hype mobility sector, which has been the darling of the venture capital world for years, just had a very harsh dose of reality this week.
It was a brutal week for hardware companies. It really signals a broader reckoning that, money is getting tighter and business models that depend on eternal growth are starting to crack.
So what happened?
We saw a triple bankruptcy blow. 3 significant high-profile names all filed at once.
Who were they?
iRobot, famous for the Roomba robotic vacuum. Luminar, a key player in LiDAR technology, the eyes for autonomous vehicles. And Rad Powerbikes, a leader in the e-bike sector.
Those seem like pretty diverse companies. What market forces drove all 3 into insolvency at the same time?
They all cited a familiar, sort of toxic combination of macroeconomic problems,
Such as?
unresolved issues with international tariffs, a lingering headache from previous trade disputes, persistent supply chain disruptions that just inflated manufacturing costs, and, of course, intense competition.
Especially in consumer robotics and e-bikes.
Absolutely. And for Luminar, the high cost of developing that sophisticated LiDAR tech, coupled with the slow, expensive path to autonomous vehicle adoption, just burned through their cash reserves way faster than expected.
So for you, the learner, this really underscores the extreme vulnerability of business models that rely on rapid technological growth and high-volume production, especially in an economically volatile environment.
Exactly. These aren't software companies with low overhead. They're hardware companies with massive upfront costs.
And the iRobot case was particularly noteworthy, right? They were on the brink of being bought by Amazon.
They were. A massive acquisition that ultimately fell through because of regulatory concerns. That failure just left them exposed to those high production costs and the intense competition from cheaper manufacturers.
And that fragility wasn't just confined to hardware makers struggling with tariffs. We saw a critical vulnerability exposed that really emphasized the reliance of our most sophisticated systems on basic analog infrastructure.
Right in San Francisco.
Right in San Francisco.
Yeah.
A critical failure point involving Waymo, the Google-backed autonomous vehicle company.
During a massive citywide power outage initiated by the local utility PG&E Pacific Gas and Electric Company,
Right.
which at first impacted over 130,000 customers, Waymo had to immediately suspend its entire Robotaxi service.
The whole fleet just shut down.
The whole fleet, it demonstrated a profound lack of resilience.
And what was the immediate real-world impact on the city when that happened?
The issue was infrastructural reliance. When the power went out, the traffic signals went dead. And the Waymo Robotaxis, despite all their advanced onboard computer vision and AI systems, they just stalled. They stalled in heavy traffic.
I saw videos of this. They were blocking key streets, intersections.
Exactly, blocking intersections where human drivers were trying to navigate the signal blackout. And this significantly hampered emergency response vehicles trying to get to affected areas.
So you can have the smartest car in the world, but if the streetlights are dead, the system fails.
It fails.
Yeah.
It forces us to reconsider the entire definition of autonomy. The car might be autonomous, but its decision-making environment is not.
That's the perfect way to put it. It raises a really important question for regulators and city planners, doesn't it?
It does. If these systems can't adapt to a simple, predictable infrastructure failure like a power outage, a blackout is hardly a black swan event.
Right.
How reliable are they in truly unforeseen, high-complexity scenarios like a natural disaster or a targeted cyber attack?
It forces developers to really rethink contingencies for mass deployment. It has to be about resilience, not just capability. And yet, despite these glaring fragility concerns, the global race for robotaxi dominance isn't slowing down one bit.
Oh, quite the opposite. We are seeing major international collaborations that signal a profound shift in market acceptance.
Like what?
Uber and Lyft have announced plans to trial Baidu's Apollo Go robotaxis in the United Kingdom starting in 2026.
So Chinese AV tech coming to Western markets.
In a big way. This showcases the aggressive global push to integrate that technology, and it's intensifying the competition, forcing established Western players to respond very, very quickly.
Let's pivot to AI ethics, because the speed of technology is not only outpacing our infrastructure, it is dangerously outpacing our ability to handle the immediate social and legal repercussions.
And the new stack reveals a tragic and deeply disturbing ethical crisis involving AI-generated explicit content.
What happened?
We saw a horrific case involving a 13-year-old girl who was expelled from her school in the United States after she confronted a boy who had circulated AI-generated nude images of her among their classmates.
Wait, I need you to repeat that. Let me make sure I heard that correctly. The victim was punished, expelled from school.
Yes.
But the perpetrator who created and circulated these malicious, non-consensual deepfake images was not disciplined.
That is precisely the core of the controversy and the ethical crisis. Her attorneys argue that the school's decision reveals a deeply troubling double standard in handling this kind of content involving minors.
It highlights the urgent need for schools, for legal systems, for tech platforms to establish clear guidelines and accountability structures.
Because these tools now facilitate criminal and abusive acts faster and more anonymously than ever before.
It forces us to ask, what ethical structures can even keep up with generation speed? This technology is exploiting old vulnerabilities abuse, bullying with unprecedented reach and ease.
And it creates a sense of helplessness for the victims and complicates the legal landscape immensely. The proof of the crime is instantaneously created and distributed, often without the victim even knowing.
On the geopolitical side of AI, that rivalry between the US and China, it continues to heat up, specifically in microchip technology.
Yeah, where fundamental material science is now the battleground.
The rivalry is intensifying at a foundational level, the very material used in the chips.
It is. Chinese scientists recently announced the development of the world's first carbon-based microchip, specifically designed for artificial intelligence tasks.
A carbon-based chip.
This is a scientific leap with massive strategic implications.
So why carbon? The industry has been dominated by silicon for decades. What's the fundamental advantage?
Well, the shift to carbon isn't just about reducing reliance on foreign supply chains. It's about pushing the physical limits of Moore's law.
Okay.
Carbon nanotubes, at least theoretically, offer superior performance over traditional silicon. They can conduct electricity faster and operate with far greater energy efficiency.
So by developing carbon chips, China is signaling that it's aiming for an entirely new, potentially superior foundational technology.
One that could eventually leapfrog the current Western-dominated silicon architecture.
And despite the intense competitive tensions and U.S. regulatory pressures trying to, decouple the supply chains.
The sources indicate that some companies are already making choices based on performance, not politics.
That's the fascinating economic reality here, isn't it?
It is. The sources show that despite all the tensions and U.S. attempts to limit access to high-end semiconductors, some global companies are already beginning to choose Chinese AI technology for performance reasons.
It indicates that raw technological capability and accessibility are, for certain businesses, overriding the geopolitical imperative to stick exclusively with Western suppliers.
It presents a very complex calculation for corporate leaders who are trying to navigate an increasingly fragmented global tech market.
That brings us to Section 4, global flashpoints. Moving from technological stress to outright geopolitical conflict, let's transition into the delicate diplomacy surrounding the Ukraine conflict.
Okay. The central development this week revolves around the highly unusual Miami peace talks in the United States. Miami. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff called recent negotiations held there with Kirill Dmitriev, the envoy of Russian President Vladimir Putin, productive and constructive.
Productive and constructive. Those are certainly encouraging diplomatic buzzwords. But what exactly were they discussing? Because achieving peace has seemed impossible for years.
They were discussing the specifics of President Trump's proposed peace plan for Ukraine. And this plan, which has been widely reported and analyzed, involves massive and highly controversial concessions from the Ukrainian side.
What are the specific compromises outlined in that plan that make it so contentious?
Well, the core concessions reportedly include preventing Ukraine from ever joining NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization,
Which is their stated long-term security goal.
abandoning it completely. And crucially, the plan also involves Ukraine acknowledging Russia's control over a substantial portion of Ukrainian territory already seized and occupied by Russian forces.
So we're talking about land seized since 2014 and 2022.
Yes. And this marks a significant shift from the long-standing U.S. policy that has emphasized unconditional support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
And it's important to note the extreme complexity here. There was a dual dialogue happening at the same time in Florida.
Yes. While Witkoff and Dmitriev were meeting, a Ukrainian delegation was simultaneously consulting with U.S. and European Union representatives also in Florida.
Trying to align their positions on a peace framework, security guarantees, future aid.
Right. But those talks resulted in no significant breakthroughs, which suggests a deeply fractured path forward.
So there's clearly a significant difference between the terms Russia is open to and the terms Ukraine and its European allies are willing to accept.
A chasm, really.
And these fragile discussions are happening amidst escalating violence and internal targeting. We have reports of a high-profile figure being hit in Russia itself.
Indeed. A Russian general was killed by a car bomb in Moscow,
Hmm.
and Ukraine is strongly suspected of being
A
involved.
general killed in the capital.
It shows a massive, worrying escalation in the scope of this conflict. It demonstrates an ability to carry out sophisticated, targeted attacks against high-ranking Russian military figures deep within Russian territory.
Which significantly raises the internal security stakes for the Kremlin.
To a whole new level.
Moving to the Middle East, tensions surrounding Israeli settlements and demolitions in the occupied territories continue to escalate, drawing international condemnation.
The Israeli government approved 19 new Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank.
19.
19 in one go. This singular approval brings the 3-year total of approvals to 69, marking a continuous and substantial increase in settlement activity.
And the international reaction.
Immediate and sharp criticism, including from the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who stated that these expansions fundamentally undermine peace efforts and the viability of a two-state solution.
And the civilian impact of these policies remains devastating for Palestinian residents.
Absolutely. In occupied East Jerusalem, Israeli forces demolished a 4-story residential building. This resulted in the immediate displacement of approximately 100 Palestinian residents.
And human rights organizations argue these actions violate international law and undermine any prospect for peace.
They do, while the Israeli government justifies these moves by citing various security concerns and historical claims to the land, which just creates this continuous cycle of friction and displacement.
And compounding this political strife is the dire humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip.
This situation is critical and it's rapidly worsening. Gaza's health ministry issued a grave warning regarding alarming medicine shortages.
Do we have specific numbers?
We do, and they're terrifying. 321 essential medicines and 710 medical consumables are completely out of stock.
Out of stock. What does that mean in percentage terms?
That's a 52% shortage of essential medicines and a 71% shortage of consumables.
What is the human cost of these specific shortages for the residents?
This lack of crucial medical supplies, and this is everything from basic antibiotics and trauma kits to specialized medicines for chronic conditions, is jeopardizing emergency care for about 200,000 patients.
It's just a catastrophic failure of the system.
It is. Following years of conflict and restrictions, the health infrastructure is severely damaged, leading the ministry to issue an urgent appeal for international intervention to prevent a public health catastrophe.
Meanwhile, in North Africa, Libya remains politically stagnant years after its planned transition to democracy, a profound failure of governance.
The UN Special Representative for Libya, Hannah Tedda, she briefed the Security Council, reporting that election prospects, which were initially planned for 2021, are fading rapidly.
And the country is still profoundly divided.
Deeply. Between the administrations seated in Tripoli in the west and Benghazi in the east. Each one refuses to cede authority to the other.
Can you just remind us why that deep political division persists between Tripoli and Benghazi?
Sure. The division stems from the post-Gaddafi civil conflict, where various factions, often backed by different foreign powers, established two competing centers of power.
So the government in Tripoli is the one that's internationally recognized.
Right, but the rival administration in Benghazi, which is backed by military strongmen, controls significant eastern territory and resources. The persistent divisions and the lack of a unified security force are the main barriers to holding a nationwide, credible election.
And Tedda also raised alarms about humanitarian and human rights abuses in the country.
Yes, she highlighted widespread violations, including violence against women and arbitrary detentions without due process. She urged Libyan leaders to prioritize the demands of their citizens and unify the nation.
Stressing that the path to elections is achievable, but only with genuine cooperation.
Cooperation that currently seems completely absent.
Before we leave this area, let's acknowledge a crucial step toward international accountability for past atrocities in the region.
This is a significant legal development out of Germany. They've utilized the principle of universal jurisdiction,
Which allows a country to prosecute serious crimes like war crimes or crimes against humanity, regardless of where they were committed.
Exactly. And they're using it to bring a former Syrian prison guard, known as Fahad A., to justice.
What specifically was he charged with?
He was charged with crimes against humanity for participating in the torture of prisoners at a Syrian facility between 2011 and 2012, right at the start of the conflict.
In the details of the abuse.
Prosecutors allege it included systematic electric shocks, severe beatings, and other methods of physical abuse, which contributed to at least 70 prisoner deaths.
So this trial really underscores Germany's commitment to setting a strong precedent for prosecuting perpetrators of war crimes, even if they occurred thousands of miles away.
A very strong precedent.
Switching focus across the Atlantic, the U.S. is intensifying its pressure campaign on Venezuela, which is sparking international warnings about regional instability.
The U.S. is heightening naval operations in the Caribbean. They're pursuing a third oil tanker linked to Venezuela's dark fleet in just a fortnight.
And these vessels, they fly a false flag, right?
Right. They switch flags or use flags of convenience to evade U.S. sanctions aimed at curbing oil revenues flowing to the government of Nicolás Maduro.
And the reaction from Venezuelan authorities.
Immediate condemnation. They called these aggressive naval actions piracy and economic warfare.
And they argue that the U.S. is interfering with legitimate commerce and sovereignty.
They do. And more significantly, both Russia and China have issued warnings that this escalation of U.S. military actions risks broader regional instability.
Which just highlights the intricate geopolitical stakes involved in the oil trade and sanctions enforcement in the Caribbean basin.
It's a very tense situation.
On the note of projecting hard power, France made a major military announcement this week, reinforcing their position as a global player.
French President Emmanuel Macron announced the construction of the new generation aircraft carrier, or PANGing. That stands for Port Avion Nouvelle Generation.
And this is going to be a nuclear-powered vessel.
Yes, designed to replace their aging Charles de Gaulle carrier by 2038.
Why is making it nuclear-powered such a strategic statement?
It's a massive commitment to hard power projection and independence. Being nuclear-powered gives the carrier unlimited range and endurance.
Meaning it doesn't have to constantly rely on friendly ports for refueling.
Exactly. Macron made the announcement while visiting French troops in the UAE, and he specifically emphasized the strategic importance of regions like the Strait of Hormuz.
He underscored the necessity for France to be, and I think this was the quote, strong to be feared, in a world facing increasing aggression.
That's the quote.
What are the sheer specifications of this thing?
The vessel will be 310 meters long, 85 meters wide. It'll accommodate approximately 30 fighter jets and a crew of about 2,000 members.
Which makes France, alongside the U.S., the only nations operating nuclear-powered aircraft carriers,
giving them significant strategic weight within Europe and within NATO.
Finally, in Asia, we see a long, simmering border conflict flaring up again, requiring urgent diplomatic intervention.
Malaysia is hosting a special meeting of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, to mediate fierce fighting between Thailand and Cambodia.
Along their 817-kilometer border, this conflict has been going on for a while.
It has, often centered around territorial disputes like the 11th century Priya Vihir temple, and it has resulted in over 80 deaths and displaced nearly 900,000 people.
900,000 people displaced. That is an alarming level of human suffering for a border dispute.
It is absolutely staggering. The goal of this urgent ASEAN mediation is to reinstate a truce that had previously broken down. The involvement of the regional bloc just underscores the urgency of finding a diplomatic resolution to prevent further instability.
And in Northeast Asia, North Korea is issuing some sharp rhetoric toward Japan regarding nuclear policy.
North Korea issued a very strong warning against Japan, urging them not to pursue nuclear weapons.
And this was in response
to remarks made by a senior Japanese advisor who suggested that Japan might need to consider developing its own nuclear policy given the current security environment.
citing China and North Korea's growing arsenals.
Exactly. This exchange is a critical flashpoint that directly impacts the strategic nuclear balance of the entire region.
Okay, moving now to Section 5. Economic shifts and market volatility. Everything we just discussed.
Yeah.
The wars, the military buildups, the political divisions, the deep uncertainty.
It's immediately and profoundly reflected in the financial markets.
And the clearest signal is the rapid flight to safety.
You can literally see that geopolitical anxiety priced into the valuation of gold and silver. Both have surged to historic levels. The price of gold smashed past $4,400 per ounce.
And silver hit a record high this week as well.
It did.
What's fueling this massive rally right now? Is it purely fear, or are there deeper monetary policy drivers at play?
It's a powerful combination of both. First, you have the fear component. All the mounting geopolitical tensions globally. All the flashpoints we just discussed contribute to an environment where investors view traditional currencies and even government bonds as holding more risks.
Yeah, and the second driver relates to the U.S. Federal Reserve's policy, which is often the biggest market mover.
Exactly. Investors are increasingly anticipating significant interest rate cuts by the Fed in the coming quarters.
And lower interest rates decrease the opportunity cost of holding non-yielding assets like precious metals.
Right. If your bonds and savings accounts offer poor returns, tangible assets like gold become far more attractive as a safe haven store of value.
So it's the classic strategy of institutional investors turning to tangible assets to mitigate risk in a volatile, uncertain climate
Yeah.
where monetary policy is expected to loosen.
Precisely. It reflects a significant trend of institutions and high net worth individuals shifting their portfolios to hedge against potential inflation or systemic economic shocks.
Let's look at some specific industry adjustments stemming from global trade issues. The sources reveal an interesting glut in the bourbon market in the United States.
Jim Beam, the renowned bourbon producer, announced a significant year-long halt in production at its main distillery in Claremont, Kentucky.
A whole year?
A whole year. They plan to pause operations until 2026. This is due to rising bourbon inventories, a substantial oversupply in the market.
And this inventory issue, it traces back in part to political decisions made years ago that affected international trade. Can you walk us through that mechanism?
This bourbon glut is a perfect microexample of how international trade disputes create these long-term headaches. The sources specifically point out that the inventory rise was influenced partly by lingering international tariffs.
Retaliatory tariffs from the Trump administration that persisted.
Right, and these tariffs significantly reduced European and other overseas demand for U.S. bourbon, forcing producers like Jim Beam to just accumulate massive inventories in warehouses that were intended to be sold internationally.
So a policy decision intended to address one trade imbalance ends up causing a domestic production halt years later. That really shows the long tail of trade policy.
It absolutely does. It affects everything from future supply stability to employment in Kentucky.
Shifting to consumer costs, there's troubling news about fuel pricing in the United Kingdom, where consumers might be victims of weak competition.
A consumer watchdog in the UK issued a stark warning. They said weak competition among fuel retailers is allowing them to maintain excessively high profit margins.
So the implication is that drivers may be significantly overpaying for petrol and diesel.
Right, because retail prices are not falling as fast as the wholesale price of crude oil dictates they should.
That's a direct hit to household budgets and contributes to broader inflation, especially during a time of economic strain.
It forces regulators to ask tough questions about price gouging and market structures to make sure that savings from lower global oil prices are actually passed on to the everyday driver.
Meanwhile, on the international trade front, China is posting massive trade surplus numbers, but they're facing severe internal challenges.
China achieved a record trade surplus of over $1 trillion in the first 11 months of 2025.
$1 trillion.
This massive export success has been a key driver for their economy, but the success comes with a big, flashing warning sign.
What's the downside of such a colossal trade surplus for China?
Analysts are cautioning that this substantial surplus is highly likely to trigger a protectionist response from other countries in 2026.
So the U.S. and the European Union will likely respond with new tariffs, anti-dumping duties, other trade barriers.
Which could negatively impact China's future growth goals. And on top of that, internally, China faces severe economic challenges, deflation, low household consumption, and a necessary pivot toward a consumption-led growth model.
They have the exports, but internally the economy remains sluggish and unbalanced.
A very complicated picture. It shows global economic dependence is as much a source of tension as it is a source of growth.
Let's touch briefly on a social media trend that is revealing stark income disparities and crushing debt burdens in the U.S.
We're seeing a social media trend where individuals are openly revealing their jobs and their annual salaries, often in the context of their cost of living and outstanding debt.
And this transparency has prompted a national conversation about income and financial realities.
It has. It's moving the discussion out of the boardroom and into the public forum.
And what are these discussions revealing about the average American's financial state?
They reveal massive income disparities, of course, but the debt figures are often what's really shocking, especially among younger professionals. We saw one contributor who earns a decent $72,000 a year disclose a staggering $250,000 debt owed to the U.S. government, mostly from student loans.
$250,000. That figure just highlights the crushing burden of debt that plagues so many people, even when they're earning what seems like a reasonable professional salary.
It is. The transparency, while sometimes awkward, is crucial for fostering understanding about wage stagnation and the rising cost of higher education.
It allows the average person to see that they are not alone in their financial struggles.
And it simultaneously forces a wider recognition of the systemic problems with education funding and the cost of living.
Finally, in the tech meets community intersection, we have a literal case of technological profits drowning out community well-being in the United States.
That's happening in Hood County, Texas. Residents there are battling nonstop noise described as, and this is a quote, torture,
And where is it coming from?
from a nearby Bitcoin mining facility's cooling fans. These operations require massive continuous cooling systems, which create this persistent, loud hum 2047.
And the residents are being told the facility brings tax revenue and jobs, but at what cost to their quality of life?
It raises that core conflict between maximizing technological profits and preserving community well-being. The residents feel their voices are just being drowned out.
And experts are warning this is a precursor for similar conflicts.
Absolutely. Conflicts that will arise when massive AI data centers, which also require enormous, loud cooling infrastructure, begin deploying across more rural and residential communities.
That's a critical point about resilience we'll circle back to in our final thought. Let's move to Section 6, Political Accountability and Domestic Strains. We'll start in the U.S. with the Department of Justice's struggle for transparency surrounding the release of the Epstein files.
The Department of Justice, the DOJ, released a massive trove of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein's case. But the process was immediately marred by drama involving specific visual evidence and perceived political maneuvering.
Specifically, 13 photographs were quickly removed from the DOJ's website after their initial release.
That's right. And one of those photographs reportedly featured President Donald Trump. The removal sparked immediate public backlash and threats of legal action from a bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers.
And they were demanding greater transparency and accountability from the DOJ.
They were.
What was the DOJ's official justification for pulling the images down so quickly?
The official claim was that the photos were removed to protect victims' concerns over the impact such images could have.
But critics and lawmakers argued that this victim protection excuse was being used to shield high-profile individuals,
Including President Trump and his associates, from public scrutiny. They said it would set a deeply troubling legal precedent.
So this incident isn't just about one politician or one set of images. It's about testing the fundamental limits of the Epstein Files Transparency Act itself, isn't it?
Absolutely. The DOJ ultimately reinstated the photos after all the intense pressure. And lawmakers are now pushing for the Attorney General to be held accountable for what they see as failures in complying with the Transparency Act.
Highlighting that deep desire for nonpartisan scrutiny in these legal proceedings and ensuring the law is applied equally, regardless of political power.
That's the core of it.
Moving across the pond, the United Kingdom political landscape saw a crisis of integrity this week, highlighting the stringent standards expected of public figures.
We saw two significant ethical failures involving high-ranking figures. Dame Anne Lim, the influential chair of the King's Foundation and a nominee peer, admitted to misleadingly claiming a doctorate on her curriculum vitae.
Wow.
Which immediately raised concerns about truthfulness and transparency in public office, especially for individuals advising the monarchy.
And the second case involved a Scottish politician stepping down over a failure in judgment.
Yes. Pam Duncan-Glancy, a Labour member of the Scottish Parliament, or MSP, and the party's education spokeswoman, resigned after admitting a serious error of judgment concerning her links to a convicted sex offender.
And both cases just highlight the stringent standards of accountability and ethical conduct now demanded of public figures in the UK.
Where trust is very easily lost.
The political dynamic within the U.S. Republican Party remains as colorful and complex as ever, largely centered around President Trump and those vying for influence.
Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie continued his role as an internal critic, publicly criticizing what he called an awful week for President Trump.
Amidst a number of controversies, including a primetime speech and the renaming of the Kennedy Center.
Right. Christie continues to position himself as a voice for integrity and traditional conservatism within the party, contrasting sharply with the populist leadership style of the current administration.
And mixing celebrity with political friction, we had that viral moment at AmericaFest, the massive conservative youth event.
Indeed. Rapper Nicki Minaj created quite a stir during her appearance at the Turning Point USA event. She, either playfully or mistakenly, referred to Vice President J.D. Vance as an assassin on stage.
An assassin. That's a memorable choice of words.
It is. And while it sparked laughter and engaged the younger demographic, the playful banter just underscores the current fusion of entertainment and political commentary.
Where political rallies feel more and more like rock concerts.
Exactly.
In Europe, political polarization continues its rapid march, exemplified by Spain's regional elections, which saw a major shift.
Spain's ruling Socialist Workers' Party, the PSOE, led by Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, suffered a historic defeat in the regional elections in Extremadura.
Their worst ever result in that region.
It was. And the far-right party Vox capitalized dramatically, making substantial gains and cementing their political presence across the Spanish electorate.
This result really reflects the increasing political polarization we're seeing across Europe.
Where center-left parties are struggling to hold on to their traditional strongholds against populist right-wing movements.
Conversely, in India, the ruling coalition continues to demonstrate strong dominance at the local level, suggesting a different political trajectory.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi praised the Mahayuti alliance, which includes his Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, for an overwhelming victory in the Maharashtra local body polls.
How big was the win?
The alliance clinched 207 out of 288 municipal seats. This electoral success solidifies the coalition's dominance in regional governance.
Which Modi attributed directly to their focus on development-oriented policies and strong infrastructure investments.
That's right.
Now for Section 7. Health, climate, and cultural notes. We have a severe humanitarian health crisis to discuss in Sudan, compounded by ongoing conflict.
South Darfur, Sudan, is suffering a severe measles outbreak that is rapidly overwhelming the limited resources of Nyala Teaching Hospital.
The situation is dire and is compounded by the ongoing conflict between the Sudanese military and paramilitary forces.
Which has just devastated infrastructure and limited medical access.
And the most critical shortage is simple prevention, which is heartbreaking.
Yes. There is a dire lack of vaccines, putting an alarming 5 million Sudanese children at immediate risk.
5 million.
According to international aid organizations like Doctors Without Borders or MSF, the hospital is operating far beyond capacity, trying to treat this highly contagious but preventable virus in children under 5. The conflict makes vaccine delivery nearly impossible.
Creating a perfect storm for a humanitarian catastrophe.
It really is.
Switching back to the United Kingdom, an infrastructure failure, this time supply chain infrastructure, is affecting a very sensitive area of healthcare.
Labor and delivery.
Exactly.
There is a significant looming shortage of epidural kits, which are crucial for pain management during labor and various surgical procedures. The shortage is expected to last until at least March in the UK.
And why is this happening?
It's due to a major supplier ceasing the manufacturing of key components, specifically the specialized epidural bags.
That has immediate and significant repercussions for expecting families.
Absolutely. It raises considerable concerns for healthcare providers and families who rely on this type of pain relief. It could force a reliance on alternative, less effective, or more invasive methods.
And potentially delay elective surgical procedures as well.
It could.
Let's look at the ongoing political debate in the U.S. regarding the Affordable Care Act, or ACA. The core debate centers on its fundamental affordability.
The central debate centers on the perpetually rising costs of ACA premiums. Critics, like those writing in conservative-leaning media, argue that the continuing necessity of significant long-term government subsidies to keep premiums manageable
is irrefutable proof that the system is fundamentally unaffordable.
That's their argument.
So if the system only works because the government is constantly footing half the bill, the system itself is structurally flawed.
That's the crux of the conservative critique. They contend that the persistent need for constant financial support highlights a failure in the original premise of making healthcare accessible and sustainable without perpetual, massive federal investment.
And they argue for market-based reforms instead.
While supporters, conversely, argue that the subsidies are a necessary, permanent component of the social safety net, similar to Social Security or Medicare.
Let's turn to environmental and animal welfare issues, starting with India's ancient Aravalli mountain range.
Union Minister Bhupender Yadav addressed the ongoing controversy regarding mining activities near the Aravalli Range, which spans the states of Delhi, Gujarat, and Rajasthan.
And what was his message?
He insisted that the government is fully committed to balancing economic development with ecological preservation. He dismissed allegations that they are ignoring environmental health mandates.
So a classic balancing act between industry and environment.
Exactly. He reiterated the government's commitment to a green Aravalli guided by Supreme Court mandates for scientific assessment and conservation.
But environmental groups remain wary.
They do, noting that economic pressures often win out over long-term ecological health in these regions.
The UK is also planning a major overhaul of its farming standards related to animal welfare.
The government plans to implement a significant overhaul of its animal welfare strategy, which notably includes a complete ban on hen cages and pig farrowing crates.
That's a massive shift away from certain traditional industrial farming practices.
Mm-hmm.
What's the rationale behind banning farrowing crates specifically?
Farrowing crates are used to confine sows during and after birth. They're often criticized for preventing natural movement and mother-piglet interaction.
So this decision is part of a broader commitment to ensuring high standards of welfare in farming.
Reflecting evolving public understanding and expectations regarding animal rights. The industry is now awaiting specifics on phase-out dates and costs, but it signals a major regulatory direction.
And speaking of shifting ecology, we have an unusual marker of climate change in the UK. Year of the octopus.
The UK recorded a record number of octopus sightings this year, the highest number since 1950.
And what's the reason?
The wildlife trusts have attributed this phenomenon primarily to warmer sea temperatures around the British Isles.
That's a fascinating, if alarming, indicator.
It is. Octopuses thrive in these slightly warmer conditions, and this surge is a visible biological indicator of significant shifts in marine ecosystems linked directly to climate change.
As species migrate or reproduce more successfully in changing temperatures, we will continue to see these novel population shifts.
We will.
Finally, some cultural notes to wrap up before our final thought. Christmas travel is facing its traditional hurdles in the UK.
Yes. The British rail network is bracing for peak holiday disruption due to necessary engineering work.
And the rail industry argues that the Christmas period, when commercial and commuter traffic is lowest, is strategically the least disruptive time for these massive infrastructure upgrades.
But for travelers dependent on the trains for holiday plans, it's still significant closures and inconvenience during a key family period.
It is a classic battle between infrastructure necessity. The rail lines desperately need modernization and repair, and customer inconvenience.
It's a guaranteed source of frustration every single year.
And on a much lighter, heartwarming note, we have a dose of simple celebrity kindness.
Robbie Williams, the British singer, provided a touching moment when he surprised a 94-year-old fan named Norma at the Humberston care home.
I love stories like this.
Norma had always expressed her admiration for him, and the surprise visit brought immense joy to her and the other residents. It just highlights the positive impact of simple gestures and community connection on the elderly.
Proving that not all global news has to be about conflict and crises.
It's a much-needed dose of humanity to balance out the intense geopolitical and technological challenges we've covered.
A reminder that amidst the global complexity, human connection remains vital.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean? We have sprinted through discoveries that redefine human biology, faced a literal breakdown of autonomous technology due to a power outage, tracked massive strategic threats in space, and watched institutional money flee to gold as global political uncertainty mounts.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire stack of news reveals a powerful recurring theme. Advanced technology is consistently outpacing our foundational resilience and our ethical frameworks.
Right, whether we're talking about AI facilitating child abuse faster than schools can react,
or a massive autonomous vehicle fleet stalling out because one utility substation in California fails. Our most sophisticated systems are built upon surprisingly fragile analog foundations.
the challenge isn't just innovating, creating a new carbon ship or a nuclear aircraft carrier. It's regulating, reinforcing, and being truly ready for the full-scale consequences of those innovations.
It feels like the drive for innovation velocity is currently outrunning our capacity for foundational safety and infrastructure maintenance.
Which raises an important question for you, the learner, to consider as you digest all of this information.
We've seen how our most advanced technologies, from robotaxis to anti-satellite weapons, are creating exponential capabilities but also exponential vulnerabilities.
So if a simple, localized power grid failure can halt our most sophisticated autonomous systems, and if technology can facilitate criminal acts faster than society can regulate them, are we prioritizing innovation velocity over foundational resilience and safety?
And what happens when the push for technological supremacy creates new points of failure that far outweigh the stability of the infrastructure they rely on?
That's a powerful note to end on, a reminder that we must not confuse sophistication with stability. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll be back next week to process the next stack.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.